It's Mountain Monday, and you know what to do. Breathe in. And out. And breathe in. And out. That was Mountain Monday with allergies, so I'm pretty proud of myself. Yay. But this is a bit of a sad Mountain Monday. And I know it's all supposed to be about Zen, but I haven't quite found my Zen on this one. I'm still dealing with the sadness on this one, and that's what it is for me. It's not about outrage, or it's not about making a point. It's just sad. It's and the sadness is that one of my favorite characters ever in video games, ever, was pulled into this culture war nonsense by a company I'm sure that meant well, but I believe, and this is the sort of moment of Zen for this Mountain Monday, I believe that the company missed the fact that games do the best to heal the soul when they get enough distance from the real world to allow us to look at ourselves. And of course, I'm talking about Minsk from the Baldur's Gate games, and I'm talking about the Dragonspear additional game for people who don't know. A company called Beamdog got the rights to the old Baldur's Gate games, and they have been making additional content tacked on to the enhanced editions of the past two games. This is their first one that's sort of a standalone, and it's called Siege of Dragonspear. I was really looking forward to this game, and now I'm just sad. And it's a little thing, but it's a little thing that didn't need to happen. And to me, it's a symptom of a larger problem in gaming right now, where games feel the need to be, quote unquote, smart, or engage in social commentary, or take these little pointed, bitter jokes, when really the most important thing a game can do, no matter what else it does, but the most important thing a game can do for someone is to sort of absorb them so much that it takes them out of themselves. This is the critical, immersive aspect of video games that's so important. And so many people in development have forgotten this in the quest for, I don't know what the word is, legitimacy, or doing something that quote unquote matters. And, I've been on my own journey with this. I was, a very smart kid. But I always had this sort of weird desire, and I say weird because it was the last thing that someone would expect from this sort of shy, introverted kid, to have this desire to make people laugh, to make people happy. And for whatever reason, I have always felt that entertaining people, making them feel just a little bit better, is the most noble thing a person can do. And, that's not something everybody's going to feel. And that's why there's different types of people in this world. But I made a conscious choice when I was quite young, that I sort of had to decide, all right, I can do a lot of things. Do I want to focus on improving people's lives through quantitative means, meaning get into sciences and extend people's lives in some way, shape, or form? Or do I want to focus on the qualitative elements of life and try to improve those? And I thought that I was best served by, I thought I could do best. I could play my part the best by improving the quality of people's lives in little ways. And that's really driven everything I do. When I get into any sort of charity initiative, it's always, okay, how does this make people's lives better today? I'm not interested in things that, we'll do things 10, 15 years from now, because there's a lot of people doing that. And by that, I mean like the research stuff. And that's very important, but that's not my part in the equation. I want to do things that are simple and effective and can improve people's lives, if not today, then tomorrow, short term, And it's amazing what tiny little things can get people through today and get them on to tomorrow, and then tomorrow gets better, and then the next day gets better, and then the next day gets better. And I didn't realize it at the time, but that was something that, I wanted for me. I wanted, when I was a kid, for someone to just make that day a little bit better. And then, the next day would be better than that, and the next day would be better than that. And there weren't many people until I really got to high school who were that for me. What I had was video games. And it was really the first game that really allowed me to step outside myself was Super Mario 3. And it was just such a strange game that, it was a raccoon tail that could make you fly, and these little toad guys who were like, wah, wah, and like they didn't even make that noise at the time. But Toad has always been like my favorite sort of in my soul Super Mario character, because he's little and cute. But he's kind of cranky, but not. He has those moments. He's one of those people that's always happy, but he has those moments of, wah, and then he's happy again. And that's not like me at all. So I really like Toad. But that was the first game that sort of, no matter how lousy I was feeling, I could play Super Mario 3 and feel better. Forget that I was feeling bad. Actually, forget that I was feeling bad is a better way to describe it. Because then when you turn the game off, you feel bad again, right? Some people are probably nodding, listening to this because they know that. They've been there. And so then when I got older, the Baldur's Gate games had a different impact on me. Those games were this gateway to a world, and I'd been vaguely aware of it through the Forgotten Realms Dungeons and Dragons stuff, but that all came in books. It was static imagery. This was the closest I'd ever come to actually being able to step into the Forgotten Realms and actually see the Underdark and see the Sword Coast. And when I'd played Forgotten Realms Dungeons and Dragons, we sort of made up our own places. We didn't use the maps. We used the creatures and the characters, but we made up our own maps. That's just the way we played. But it was this portal into another world where there were people, and there were good people and bad people, but there were people who would be your friends. And, one of those friends was this demented, sort of burly, physical beast of a dude who was sort of a gentle giant, and that was Minsk. And, of course, he was voiced masterfully by Jim Cummings, and he was just, a friend in a world where there aren't enough of them. And a lot of people have been agreeing that they didn't realize how much they cared about Baldur's Gate until this thing happened. And the thing about Minsk was so simple that he'd never really hurt you. And that was the amazing thing, especially for me, with some of the experiences I had as a kid. He was this big, strong dude. I mean, his strength score was off the charts. One of the things in Baldur's Gate 2 is you make him mad enough that he breaks through his bars. He's like this berserker rage, but really he's a teddy bear. And that, I guess that glimpse into an adult man, and this is a bit of an overshare, but I think it's important right now. This glimpse into an adult man who could hurt you, but didn't, was very important. And, a big, strong guy. And that gentleness in strength was what made me think that Minsk was great. And then, his devotion to Dinah here and all that stuff. But he was funny as well. And one of my favorite things to do was play through the game and give Minsk this sword called Lilacor, who was a sassy sort of talking sword. So it was like Minsk with this Lilacor sword. And I always thought that was just hilarious because the sword would talk, and the sword is kind of this sassy, smart, snarky sword. And then there's Minsk, who's just, one too many hits in the head. He thinks his pet hamster is a pygmy giant space hamster, which of course is a Spelljammer reference. And so, people complain about this latest thing. It's Minsk breaking the fourth wall. There's an element of breaking the fourth wall with Minsk from the beginning. What I don't like with Minsk is they took this gentle, simple character and pulled him into ugliness. And to me, that shows that whatever group of people that approved that line did not understand the importance of that character to some longtime gamers like me formative years. You know, they made Minsk hurt people. And it wasn't even him. He has no idea what he's saying, right? He's Minsk. The line itself is innocuous. It's, I've got it here. Let me see if I can play it again so you guys can hear the line. I'm just going to hold the microphone up to the speaker.
Really, it's all about ethics in heroic adventuring.
So that's all it is. Really, it's all about ethics and heroic adventuring. Innocent line in and of itself, but it evokes a lot of pain, right? And that bothers me. And it's one line. It's one line in a game. And this is really the only thing that bothers me about the, you know, allegedly politically correct stuff in Siege of Dragonspear. Because the reality is that these games, and I haven't played it yet. I wish they'd sent me a review copy, but they didn't. I would have reviewed it, and I would still review it. But I don't have an issue with the transgender character they put in. Some people pointed out it's kind of funny because you can actually, after this big long spiel about finding the true self and the true name and all that, you can kill the transgender character and they jib all over the place. I don't care if one character in a giant world is, you know, a shopkeep who happens to be, it doesn't matter to me. And I think some people are getting a little too uptight about those particular elements. I did have an issue with one of the writers throwing shade on Jaheira by saying like all she was a nagging wife. That was way more than what she actually was to a lot of gamers. And it's funny that the so-called misogynerd gamers that were the bulk of the players in this game felt so protective of Jaheira that they got mad at that comment. I mean, I didn't really use Jaheira much in Baldur's Gate 1. I ended up using Bronwyn more. And it wasn't because I liked the character better. I was just better with her in my party. But in Baldur's Gate 2, you know, Jaheira was a critical part in her sort of loyalty quest, for lack of a better term, was really quite intense. And she was a character that I grew into. And I would never consider her a nagging wife. I thought Khalid was an idiot, you know, and it was sort of, yeah, they didn't show much in their relationship, but they were that fantasy trope of the sort of long-suffering woman with the kind of dolt but, you know, caring guy. And that kind of reminded me of my maternal grandparents. So for, you know, this writer to unintentionally refer to my grandmother as nothing more than a nagging wife hit a bit close to home. But I know that wasn't intended. And a writer can have an opinion of a character all they want. I think it's very important to be careful and respect the legacy of these games as well. Say that internally. Like, say that in private. But don't crap on the source material in public. That was a big issue I have with the BBC Sherlock show. Is I feel like that show, you know, the one with Benedict Cumberbatch and Martin Freeman. I love Martin Freeman. I love his Watson. But I felt like the early episodes of that show were crapping all over the source material. And I couldn't get past that. You know, you don't switch a major plot point in A Study in Scarlet and go, we're so clever, which is what I felt the pilot did. To switch it from A Study in Scarlet to A Study in Pink or whatever, like bleh, pink, really? Bleh. Instead of red? I mean, you're deliberately diluting the color, right? But beyond that, the whole Rach thing, the big twist in it is that, you know, it's Rache, it's a German thing and it means revenge or something like that. No. And Watson, well, it means Rachel, or one of the detectives said we think it's a woman's name. No, it's not. Well, in the BBC version, it was a woman's name. And I'm like, really? That is just sharting all over the original story. You just took Conan Doyle's work and used it as toilet paper, and it wasn't even a nice butt like Tracer's, right? And that's what I sort of feel when a writer comes out and goes, "Oh, Jaheira was nothing more than a nagging wife." It's not appreciating the love that people have for this game. And even though Jaheira was never my favorite character, she was a character I really liked. And the thing that was kind of interesting about the Baldur's Gate games, everybody had their favorites, and they were all different. Imoen took me a while to like because I didn't like cute, but of course she was used much more effectively in Baldur's Gate 2. There were certain characters. What's the one they said was just sex? Safana, Viconia. I didn't play those more vampy characters. My party was, let me see if I can remember. I remember Baldur's Gate 2 better. I had Yoshimo in my party early on, unless I played as a thief. I had Hair-Delise. I loved Hair-Delise. Aerie, which is unpopular. You know, the one with the missing wings, the elf with wings who had no wings. What was her uncle who was in the first game, the little gnome guy, and they were like a circus. I love that. Quail? Was that his name? I don't remember. I didn't look any of this up before this. I'm just going by memory. And then Minsk, and of course in the first game you had to have Minsk and you had to have Dynaheir. I loved Dynaheir. I love that she told people they stink all the time. I would thank thee to remain upwind. It is hard to cast spells while I gag. I still remember that. And she was regal, and she was a woman of color back in the days where apparently no women of color existed in gaming. There was Dynaheir. But those were sort of the characters I played with. And you swap them out and use them, but those were sort of my main characters. And Imoen was in my party a lot in Baldur's Gate 2. Part of that was what happened in the plot. Is like after the first playthrough, you sort of knew what was coming, and so you put those characters in there. Other people had different characters they liked, and that's what makes this approach bother me so much, because when you have character selection, when you have character choice, you don't have to make your sidekicks perfect, right? It's fine. Even if you think Jaheira is a nagging wife, that is fine. It is fine that you can have that character in your party if you choose, because some people don't have a problem with a nagging wife. Some people don't have a problem with a character that's pure sex appeal. There's no point in having this, some characters are evil and some characters are good, if we're not allowed to have female characters with what you perceive to be a negative quality. Because one of the things about Baldur's Gate is it was one of the first games I played where you could be evil. And you'd have, what were those two guys off the top? The wizard and the fighter thief? Zar and Montaron or something like that? I don't exactly remember, because they'd always rebel on me, and then I'd have to kill them unless I ran away, because I always played good characters. But there are evil characters. There was a really interesting orc character, I think, in one of the enhanced edition expansions, the add-on character. He was really cool. But if you're allowed to play evil characters, you should be able to have nagging characters and sex object characters in your party, because it's all about choice, and it's all about the game not judging, allowing the characters to judge. And yes, the big step between Baldur's Gate and Dragon Age, when BioWare created their own sort of IP, was they brilliantly jumped from the alignment system, which determined for you, thanks Loki, whether a character was good or evil, to this party approval system, which took out sort of those judgments. And I really liked that. But even though the game was saying this person is evil, that evil character was still included. And that's critical. And so it's real easy to go back and, that whole thing in E.T. the Extraterrestrial, Steven Spielberg puts flashlights in the hands of the scientists instead of the guns, and he thinks that makes it a better movie. It doesn't objectively make it a better movie. The special editions of Star Wars, the first, 3, the original trilogy, that was something Lucas wanted to do. It doesn't necessarily make them better movies. A creative, unless you want to make yourself insane, you can't keep wanting to go back and perfect your work. That work was what you were able to do at that time with the resources and time you had in the place in your life you were at. And that has a life of its own, and that is valid. And for a new generation to come along and correct the Baldur's Gate games are up there with, the only game I think tops them is Planescape Torment, as opposed in terms of those, classic, certainly in fantasy RPGs, it stands alongside the original 2 Fallout games. These are pillars of video game history. And this idea that we have to wipe out all problematic content from the past doesn't respect the past. It doesn't appreciate that, my God, you want history to move forward. And perhaps the games were quaint. I know that BioWare developers have said they pulled punches in those games in terms of including gay characters. And so that's fine if you want to add characters that fill those holes. That's awesome. I think, what was her name? I want to say Nalia, but I think that was an existing Baldur's Gate 2 character. Yeah, I played her sometimes too, but there was another character that you could play in the enhanced edition who was a lesbian. She was a wild mage, I think. But she was an addition. She was an add-on. She wasn't replacing anything, and that's great. But when you go back and you start changing the fundamentals of these characters, and you're basically saying to a gamer who loves these games, these people who were your friends when you didn't have any, these people who you grew to love, and I don't mean romantically, but you grew to love them as friends. You grew close with them. They're not good enough for us. And by extension, you're not good enough for us because you like them. What's wrong with you? That's how it translates to a gamer who use these games as lifelines and use these games into a portal into a world that was at the very least prepared to accept them. Not like this one. That, let's face it, this world isn't doing anyone a favor unless you're wealthy. And I think that is a fundamental thing to understand about these classic isometric RPGs is they mean so much to people. And I think a lot of people are just sort of waking up to how much they meant for them. I mean, I know me, I sat there and I tortured myself playing that Minsk line over and over and over again because I'm sitting here going, I don't feel one way or the other about Gamergate as a whole. I'm not pro, I'm not anti, I don't even think the line judged it. It just referenced it. I'm like, so it's not the statement it was making. What's wrong with this thing? And I realized you're pulling a character into something that would make him sad. You're tarnishing this character. Here is this innocent, in a lot of ways pure, and he's pure in the way that only a batshit bonkers person can be. Here's this pure character and you're pulling him down into the dirt. And I don't think people would be anywhere near as upset if another character had said that. But no matter what side of the whole thing you chose or you were on no side at all, people are sick of hearing about Gamergate. Everybody else is trying to move on. And these developers who clearly have wounds themselves decided to take that one more dig or put that one more reference in because they were being clever. I don't know why they chose to do it. But what they did was pulled us back into that very ugly time. And I think we can all agree it was an ugly time no matter what side you're on. And while the rest of us are trying to move past it and actually have a discussion about not what happened then, because I don't think anybody sane is especially proud of what happened then. And by sane, I'm not trying to make mental health stigma. I'm just saying that anyone anyone with a shred of empathy. There we go. Let's not talk about mental health. Let's talk about empathy. Anybody with a shred of empathy for other people just wants to move past that. They want to forgive as much as they can, forget as much as they can, and just get on and talk about the issues, the important issues that were brought up during that controversy in a way that is healthier. We want to move beyond the ugliness of that whole thing. So we shouldn't be driven back, and we shouldn't be driven back. We shouldn't be pulled back through a very particular voice in gaming who was comfort to a lot of us. I mean, if anybody from Beamdog is listening right now, you have to understand that Minsk as a benevolent male voice is important not just to male gamers with, disapproving fathers, but to female gamers like me who, there's a lot of women out there who didn't have, I know at that time, because of what I've been through, I've because of my experiences in gaming and because I met a lot of great, very gentle guys through gaming, my opinion of men is much improved. But at that point, I wasn't a big fan of men, and I certainly wasn't a big fan of jocks. And that character was somebody I felt safe around. So how dare you take that away from me and millions of other people for a moment of your own glibness? I don't understand, Beamdog. I don't understand why you would do that from a place that really loves this property and loves these characters. It was objectively a mistake for that reason. And it took me a long time to get there, but I think it was important because I think it was important to sort of give you the whole backstory there. And I'm speaking from the heart here, and we normally go much more Zen on Mountain Mondays. But to me, Zen is about sort of mastery of emotions, finding your calm. And one of the first conversations I had with, I won't name names, but one of the people I respect the most in this entire industry was a question of Aristotelian ethics and metaphysics about the mastery of emotions. We were talking about the control, the suppression of emotion versus the mastery of emotion. And I argued that Aristotle was not advocating tamping down your emotions. He was advocating let the emotion flow through you so you understand it. And that to me is where you find calm. And that to me is where you find peace. And this is something that gaming needs to understand instead of gaming collectively, the industry, of course, because gamers get this. Gamers have this fundamental understanding of they play games to feel. Because in the real world, we're forced to shut up, sit down, be professional. We come to gaming to be allowed to let all those emotions that we're taught to be ashamed of in our day-to-day lives rise to the surface, swim through us, overwhelm us, so we can find that calm. That temporary uptick in aggression that everybody mistakes for a violent urge. Not everybody, the people that want to say games make you violent. But that temporary uptick in aggression is because we're finally given a safe place to feel. And that feeling can be anger. That feeling can be rage. It can feel sadness. When you get that release from a game, and it doesn't matter if that game is Grand Theft Auto or Papo and Yo, when you get to that point of catharsis, that is powerful. That isn't just art. That's therapy for a lot of people. And so it's important to not take those innocent, pure parts of video games. And yes, I just compared Grand Theft Auto to innocence. To an extent, it is. Even the thing I don't like about Grand Theft Auto is that gloss of cynicism that is so at odds to me with the silly joy of the ragdoll physics, and that's why I like Saints Row more, because I find that silliness of boom, oh, there goes the person bouncing in a way a human corpse would never do, is more in line in Saints Row with the goofiness of the narrative and the world than Grand Theft Auto, that's trying to sort of make this really gritty point. I just it doesn't click for me in the same way. Um, because I get why it's fun to sort of do those silly things and have it close enough, far enough, sorry, from reality that it's still fun. Because, I mean, let's face it, if you've ever seen a person get hit by a car, it's not fun in the real world. It's a grizzly. It makes you sick if you actually see it. There is a natural human revulsion for people with empathy for those real things. It's not the same in games. It is fantasy, and by fantasy I don't mean you're secretly wanting to run people over with your cars. It's, again, that safe place to feel. And I feel like Dragonspear violated a certain contract with our younger selves by taking a character like Minsk and putting him somewhere he didn't belong. And I'm pretty sure he's either a lawful good character or a neutral good character. Like, he shouldn't be anywhere near Gamergate. And I'm saying this as a writer. I'm saying this as, a content developer. I'm saying this as someone who just loves video games. I just think it's wrong. And if they took out every other "we're making a point" line in Dragonspear, I wouldn't care. But that line bothers me. And so that's why I decided to do it for Mountain Monday, because, I mean, this is something I have to work through and sort of breathe through it. And like I said, I think that for people who identify with this, for people who realized how much this character made you care, part of the reason I do these segments is so we can care together. This is an appropriate place to say, yeah, I care about games and I love these games, and I'm going to speak up about it, and I'm not going to be ashamed. You're not going to make me feel bad for actually caring about something just because it's fiction. There's this thing, oh, you should grow up, you should stop playing with kid stuff. That's not healthy. It's not healthy. With all of the sullying of religion and the politicization of faith, people still need things they believe in. And for a lot of people, that's these fictional characters, And so I'm not going to apologize for caring. I'm not going to apologize. You guys know this. I never tell a developer what to do with their product. And so I want to be clear. I'm saying I hope they take it out. I'm not saying they must. I might even still buy the game, but I hope they take it out. And I think I've shown my reasons. So I'm going to close out here. So we're going to breathe. We're going to need a big breath, breathe in and out. And breathe in. And out.